Hello there and welcome to the Exploring Christendom show. This is our very first video and we're excited you're here. Our purpose at Exploring Christendom is to expose the Christian traveler to the events, culture, and people who went before us building the church. Hilar Belloc once wrote about Christendom, quote, "Built upon the noble foundations of classical antiquity it was formed through, exists by, is consonant to, and will stand only in the mold of the Catholic Church. Europe will return to the faith or she will perish." End quotation. In the last 100 years here in the West, Catholics have lost a great deal of their identity. It seems to end at the church doors. Why is this? The answer is simple. Since the fall of man, every moment has existed for one purpose: the recapitulation of man to the heart of God. When the Christian forgets this, he loses his identity. When he forgets salvation history, he's lost his memory. Our goal at Exploring Christendom is to remind Catholics of our rich history and culture. And we're going to do this by scouring the globe for the inspiring and adventurous stories of our faithful ancestors. Today, we have such a story, and we're going to begin here in Virginia, in a time before these lands were named for the Virgin Queen, and before this land was Protestant. A time when the only Europeans brave enough to venture to these swampish banks were a small troop of Spanish Jesuits.
It was here on these banks the Spanish landed in the fall of 1570. Hundreds of miles from the nearest Spanish settlement in Florida, these priests and monks were completely on their own. They had left a military escort at home, believing their mission would be jeopardized by vagrant soldiers. You see, they had one goal, one mission: conversions. The party was led by the pious and intrepid Father Juan Baptista Segura, and with 10 companions, he quickly realized that the brackish waters of the James River could hardly support life. They had an Indian guide, though, who years earlier had been brought to Spain and converted to the Catholic faith. He had changed his name to Don Luis. Luis was a young man by all accounts, and a native of the Tidewater region. It was he who led the Spanish farther inland, away from the James, near the present-day site of Williamsburg, Virginia. Here the Spanish began building a camp, including a chapel. As the season changed to winter, the young Don Luis began to change as well. He spent more and more time away from the Jesuits with his native relatives, eventually not coming back at all. Sadly, he cast off his faith in Christ and took several wives. And as Don Luis drifted further from Christ, he began to harbor a resentment turning to hatred for the Spanish Christians. How dare these foreigners tell him how to live? He was Indian royalty in these parts, and he had no time for monkish priests. Then, in early February, 3 of the Jesuit brothers made their way to the village where Don Luis had been staying, to plead with him to come back. As they approached the village, they were ambushed by Don Luis and several of his friends. The Indians butchered the Jesuits. Realizing they had little time before the Spanish encampment learned of the murders, Luis and his cronies made their way to the camp. They murdered all save a young boy who had come with the Spanish as a ward of the Jesuits. It is from little Alonzo that we have the account of the actions of Don Luis. When a Spanish resupply ship came for the priests and found out what had occurred, they quickly demanded from the local Indians that the culprits be rounded up and executed. It seems several of the Indians were caught, however. Their leader, the butcher Don Luis, escaped justice and would grow to be the bane of early English existence when this land would be called Virginia.
The Spanish encampment with the small chapel eventually faded into the forests of the region. However, its location was remembered by the Indians still here. The story of the martyrdom of Father Segura and his compatriots was passed down for centuries, and in 1932, local Catholics, some who can actually trace their lineage back to the early 1600s, raised funds for a chapel to be built over the site of Father Segura's church in Williamsburg. It took a great deal of effort, but with persistence, these determined Catholics were able to purchase the traditional site of the Spanish martyrs, and today stands the national shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham. It has been nearly 450 years since the murders of the Spanish Jesuits, yet we remember them, their bravery and fortitude, their pious zeal to spread Christ. So if you're in Williamsburg this summer, we highly recommend making a pilgrimage to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham, or taking a drive down the Colonial Parkway to see the site where the Spanish landed in 1570. We hope you've enjoyed this show, and until next time, may Our Lady of Walsingham bless and keep you.